Hi guys, Dave from Bicycle Power Trading here. Today we're going to run through how easy it is to install a power2max onto a Shimano drivetrain bicycle. One of the most common questions we get asked is what power2max system is compatible with a Shimano drivetrain. In short, there are none. However, power2max have partnered up with ROTOR and we have a great offering for you which allows you to make use of the ROTOR ALDU 24mm spindle crankset together with a power2max spider and simply replace out your existing Shimano crankset and reuse your Shimano chainrings. The ROTOR crank arms utilize a 24mm spindle, which means you can reuse your existing bottom bracket that is set up for your Shimano drivetrain. Once you have successfully removed the chainrings from the Shimano crankset, we'll then move over to the ROTOR crankset. What needs to be done here is removing both the drive and the non-drive side crank arms from the crank spindle. Now that we have the ROTOR spindle on its own, we will install the power2max spider by simply aligning the 3 locator scores on the same lines as the ROTOR score marks. Before doing this, we recommend using a medium strength Loctite and simply placing it around the grooves of the ROTOR spindle as well as around the grooves of the power2max spider. So these just line up. Once that's been done and you've put the medium strength Loctite on, you'll take the ROTOR crank arm, place it on the spindle and then tighten it up with the right size Allen key, making sure that you tighten it to 35 to 40 Newton meters. You now have a drive side crank arm, the power2max spider tightened onto the spindle of the ROTOR crank. We'll then install the chainrings. To install the chainrings, pretty simple. Place the larger chainring on the outside and ensure that its chainring bolts line up with the spindle. Then taking the smaller chainring and making sure that you have lined the score mark up with the crank arm and again placed on the inside of the power2max spider. Reusing the chainring bolts from your Shimano crank, place these in and using the T30 tighten everything back up again. Now that we have the chainring installed onto the power2max spider and the crank installed onto the spindle, we are going to install the complete drive side crank onto the bicycle. Before we do this, we are going to need to ensure that we have the one O-ring in place and any spaces that may be needed to take up any play on the bicycle. You'll need to place any seals back onto the bottom bracket and then place the chain over the crank spindle and put it into the bottom bracket. Making sure that you place the chain on the chain rings to get it out the way when doing the final pull up. Now that we have the drive side sorted out, it is just to finish off the non-drive side. The crank spindle is protruding from the frame. Just make sure that any spaces are placed back on. If need be, you may require 1 or 2 of these just to take up any lateral play on the spindle when tightened up. And then finally, you'll need the O-ring that has been installed, placing this over the top and pushing it all the way back. You'll then take the non-drive side crank, align it up correctly and tighten it up again to 35 to 40 Newton meters. Once everything has been tightened up, you now have successfully installed a power2max onto your bicycle using your Shimano chainrings, a ROTOR ALDU 24mm crank arm, and a power2max spider.